Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the First Generation Career Exploration Panel. My name is Alexis Staten, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Career Ambassador here at the Center for Career Development. On this panel tonight, I have Truth Hunter, a PhD student, and Jeffrey Gagnon, and I'll have them go ahead and introduce themselves.
Sure, Truth, you can go first if you want.
Hi, everyone. My name is Truth Hunter. I'm a PhD student. I'm a third year in the Department of Educational Leadership with a concentration in racial justice and decolonization in higher education. I am a very proud first generation college student, and I'm delighted to be here in community with all of you today.
My name is Jeff Gagnon. I work for UConn right now. I'm the executive advisor for enrollment analytics and fiscal officer for the Division of Enrollment. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you both for coming on. So where did you both attend school for your undergrad? Truth, you could go first.
Sure. So I attended Mount Holyoke College in Western Massachusetts. I'm originally from Oakland, California, born and raised. So that was a huge culture shock for me, leaving the West Coast and going to the East Coast and going to a small, elite, predominantly white, all women's college. So it was the total opposite of everything I came from. I came from a large, public, urban, co-ed high school. So there was a lot for me to get adjusted to. So I'll just start with that. I'm sure I'll share a little bit more about my first gen experience, but that's where I did my undergrad. And I studied critical social thought with the emphasis in post-colonial studies.
So I did my undergrad at UConn. I graduated in 08. I think that's right. Yeah, 04 to 08. I came into UConn as an engineering student, and I ended up in economics. That's usually what happens when you do really well in engineering. But yeah, so I ended up in economics, and I did my undergrad work in econ, and during my senior year, I took a bunch of master's classes in economics at the same time.
Nice. So, Jeff, so who or what helped you the most during your years of college? And as a first gen student, what challenged you and what surprised you throughout college?
So that's a good question. I think there were a couple of professors that probably shaped my experience at UConn in a really positive way. When I did relatively poorly in engineering, you kind of get a little adrift at points, right, where you're changing major, you don't know what you're going to do. So I went into ASIS and I ended up taking a bunch of different classes, and economics kind of really clicked quickly, where I got to the point where everyone else was struggling and I was kind of just doing well with not studying particularly hard. And I was like, I think this might be a knack I have for economics, and it turned out to be the case. So there were a couple of professors who were very, very helpful, and they were my most challenging professors at the time. And I think that shaped a lot of my experience because it challenged me, and also they were willing to put in extra time to bring us to like little conferences and colloquiums that they were having in the department. And they were willing to help point me and a couple other classmates in a particular direction for employment and whatnot, and say like, you should study this, or you should do this, and that really helped quite a bit because, as a first gen student, a lot of times you don't have the ability to kind of navigate a space or know how to go from A to B, especially when you're making a transition, like a major change or whatnot. And that was very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of students I've realized are just afraid to ask for help. They're ashamed of being first gen, but it only takes one mentor, one question, and you never know where that could take you. So the same question for you, Truth, and I'll add, since you are a current grad student right now, what made you even pursue grad school?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So when I was in undergrad, like I shared with you, I went to Mount Holyoke College, an all women's college, and being in such an intimate environment in terms of like most class sizes were between 10 to 15 students. I got a chance to know my professors really well, and clicked with a couple who I would just give you a couple of stories. So the first one was my Africana Studies professor. And my first essay, I didn't do well at all. And I remember going to his office hours and I said, Professor Wilson, I know I just turned in that essay, but can you kind of give it back and kind of let me, work on it a little bit more? He's like, I'm sure it's not that bad. I was like, no, trust me, it is that bad. He was like, no, it's not that bad. And then he took it out and he read the conclusion and he goes, maybe you should redo this. But then he goes, wait, I'm going to teach you how to work your ideas out. And he like literally gave me a workshop on the spot in terms of like developing my argument and like how to organize my ideas. And like he was just really invested in me as a learner. And the reason why that was important as a first generation college student and also as a woman of color is because oftentimes, there's a lot of rhetoric around diversity. Like we want more diversity, but it's when someone treats you like a human being and treat you like you're capable, even if you have a learning curve, they're still interacting with you in such a way like, I know you have the potential, I know you're capable of it, but maybe I need to explain it to you in a way that speaks to your experience. And that was the first A I had ever gotten in undergrad. It was like the way he explained it, it clicked. He actually inspired me. So I'll just share that story. I have multiple stories, but I think that really defines my experience as a first generation college student. And back to your second question around why I'm a PhD student, it's connected to my undergrad experience. I had such incredible faculty members who had inspired me, and I always love ideas and thoughts and reading and writing and research. And my sophomore year in undergrad, I went to a panel of women of color who were all faculty members, and they started talking about their challenges, but also the rewards of doing. And I took copious notes, and that was year 2004 or 5. Okay. And I held on to those notes for years as a source of inspiration that I could be a PhD student. So I graduated from Mount Holyoke in 2007. I worked for 5 years. Then I came to UConn to do my master's in educational leadership the first time, and then graduated, worked for another 6 years, and then came back. So it was a long journey to make it to my PhD, even though I knew that's something I wanted to do as an undergrad. But it was those experiences, going to a panel like this one, seeing women who look like me who did it, holding on to those notes for years. Everything made a full circle. So that was my experience with that.
Right. Thank you for that. Oh, yeah, all it takes is one push, one question, one panel, and you never know where that could take you. So you both kind of touched on this, but how easy or difficult was it to meet with others and reach out to these professors and ask for help? Were you intimidated, nervous, or what? Jeff, we could start with you.
Sure. I'd say pretty intimidated in the beginning. And I think one of the biggest things that I took away from my experiences at UConn really was that the further along you get, the more you realize that it's very DIY, right? Like the more you get used to asking for what you want or knowing that you can shape your own experience here. You can do independent studies and whatever you want. You can, just because I got to know these professors, then I got to know my department head, and then they let me into master's classes in my senior year that they don't have to approve you for. But the more you make those connections, so much opens up at the university when you get over that hump, I think, of like, should I say this? Should I ask this? Should I talk to this person? Like, what are they going to think? And I think that was a big deal. And it's fun now because a lot of the stuff that I do at UConn relates directly back to that experience. So we study the way that students interact with people at the university, right? We study the way that first-gen students work through the system and how they can be successful. And can we operationalize ways to make this easier or reach out to students more and tell them, like, these are the resources that are available to you. These things are important, and try to get ahead of issues for students. So it's a fun position to be in now. Truth, actually, I don't know if you work with Morgan at all over in EDLR. We work with Morgan quite a bit, and Eric Loken and all those folks to do studies and then try to work their research insights into our business at UConn.
So to answer your question, Alexis, about was it easy or was it difficult to connect with faculty? I think it has a lot to do with the type of environment you're in. So, like I said before, I was in a small liberal arts institution, and it's sort of set up so that you can develop meaningful relationships with faculty members. So I was very close to my academic advisor, and I'll share just another little story. Um, and basically, I'm also a dancer, and I had this idea, as a first generation college student, like what it meant to be successful. And for some reason, I wasn't making that connection to dance. Like, I was still choreographing and dancing, but I wasn't bringing it into my academics. So, I had choreographed a dance that depicted like the Middle Passage, and basically I like choreographing based upon like historical events. And my advisor went. And she was just like, I've never seen anything like that. And she was just like, that's what you need to be doing for your senior thesis. Like, that is it. And what I'm getting at is that she found the thing, she nurtured my strength, and so for me, being in an environment where there are faculty members who are looking at your gifts and your talents and saying, build upon that, build your academics on that. Like, that's also a valid form of knowledge and thinking and creating as well. So, overall, it wasn't difficult for me to connect with faculty members because many of them really wanted to meet us where we were at as students.
That's great. Thank you both for that. Yeah, I tell people all the time to just take the risk, because it's better walking away with a no than living with the regret of, oh, what if I would have asked, or what if I did say something, or even just having that extra encouragement really, really does help. Truth, you kind of answered my next question of what extracurricular activities did you participate in, and how did your involvement in these activities help you in your post-college career path? But if you have something else to add, you could feel free. And Jeff, the same question for you.
Yeah, one really memorable experience is somewhat connected to what I just shared with you. The choreography that I did was connected to a position that I took on campus as the chair of Black History Month. So um, I led a committee in which we organized a whole month of events, and I remember that being really significant for me as a sophomore, being able to like lead a committee. And I remember crafting this really thoughtful letter about like how we're supposed to have representation of all people when it comes to Black History Month. And all these people were like, I never thought I would be included in something like that, but I read your letter and I just want to be a part of this. So it gave me an opportunity to um to connect people, and that was important to me, and it gave me an opportunity to also to work with faculty and students, and to just reframe the narrative of what we thought about Black History Month at Mount Holyoke College. So that really like set the tone for me after I left undergrad in terms of knowing that I had this ability to bring people together, because the first job I had was with Upward Bound, working with high school students, helping them gain access into higher education. And my responsibility was every Saturday I had to organize a speaker series, and based upon that experience, I had the confidence to reach out to people, to bring guests in and to bring people together.
Um, so from my end, I'm trying to think what extracurriculars I took part in. I did the standard college thing where you join a bunch of clubs and then you never go to the meetings and you don't show up again. So I did that. But I also I was a work study student, like lower income Pell student when I was on campus, and I worked for financial aid as my work study position at the university. So I think that experience in financial aid really shaped a lot of my future looking work, both because you get experience doing a variety of things, but also because you get experience, working the phones and talking to people who are dealing with a wide array of circumstances at the same time. And you get experience talking to people about anything and everything, and it gives you an interesting look at the way the university works and what people's experiences and how they're struggling through a variety of things. I know that everybody else who worked with me in financial aid, most of those people now are doing either financial aid work or they're working in HR, because at that point, student employment and financial aid were the same thing. So it's interesting how that experience that we had during our undergrad working, it shaped everyone's employment experience post college, because they kind of went into the same field that they were already working in.
That's great. Yeah, it seems like everything has just aligned for the both of you, hearing both of your experiences and stories, that it all has just come full circle. So looking back on your undergrad experience, what are you most proud of from your school and your first gen experience overall? Jeff, we could start with you.
Sure. I'm trying to think. I'd say the thing that I'm probably most proud of is not leaving the university after failing out of engineering. Like, that would have been an easy choice, probably. I was not doing well. I was on, double act pro. I was looking at that point probably being dismissed. And it was, it's a little tough to try to navigate that space when you don't know what happens next or where you go or how there's a way out of that. But getting rid of now this is going to sound crazy, like getting rid of my advisor from the department I was in was like key, because some advisors are fantastic. A lot of them do a lot of good work, but some advisors are a little over their heads. And especially when you're not enjoying yourself and you're not doing well and you're cratering, just hearing you're going to be an engineer, it's fine, don't worry about it, is not the way that you need to go. And ACES has a ton of great advisors that really helped me reroute my college experience, and I think that saved me a little bit, and I'm relatively proud of that. I'm also proud of the fact that I figured out pretty early, I'd say like my second half of my junior year, that there's a lot of little ways you can kind of get a leg up when you're going to be looking for employment post undergrad, right? You can do little things like joining impactful clubs or groups. You can do independent studies in the field that you want to go into. There's all these small things that make your resume really give you a leg up when you get into the workforce. And I think that doing those things and then making the connection to my professors helped quite a bit, because then they were very helpful. They're like, you should apply here, you should do this. Hey, I go to these conferences, would you like to come to the conference and hand out your resume? So, yeah, absolutely. I don't know what I'm doing at this point. Sure. Yeah, I assume you do. But yeah, that's probably what I'm most proud of.
Thank you for sharing that, Jeff. For me in undergrad, I, like I told you, I'm a dancer. I wasn't a dance major. I ended up being a critical social thought major. But my passion is bringing social justice and dance together. So my senior year in 2007, a huge global issue was genocide in the Sudan. And I went out to a lot of events and I was really following what was happening there. And I decided, myself and some of my peers, that we would put on an African dance concert to raise funds for um, people who sought asylum from the Sudan. And for me, that was probably, even to this day, one of the most meaningful things that I've ever done. It wasn't connected to a class. I wasn't getting any credit for it. It just came from my soul, but it also came from, my major, critical social thought. It came from my ability as a dancer, my love for West African dance. And we raised $5,000. I had never raised like to me, it was so empowering. And it was at the end of my senior year. And I really felt like I could do anything. I know it sounds corny, but I was like, wow, and it was a wonderful turnout. And I met so many beautiful artists who came out. All kind. So I think that was the so many people showed up. Artists who performed for free, masterful African drummers, hip hop groups, um, dance companies. I mean, the concert was extraordinary. People who were willing to do this because they felt moved to. And so that's an experience that stood out for me.
That's great. Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. It's funny that you both say that because when you look back on your experiences, you walk into college not knowing anything, and then throughout your 4 years, you're like, wow, I've done this, I've done that. There's no way I have done that because we haven't had people in our past and our family lay the foundation for us. We're forging these spaces on our own. So it's just amazing to see what we're all capable of as first gen. So thank you both for sharing that. My next question will be for Truth. How was it navigating through searching and applying for graduate level programs and finding funding for it as a first gen?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I first did my master's and I was at home. So after I left Mount Holyoke, I went back home to California and I realized that I was invested in college access, but I was even more invested in the retention of students of color, first gen and low income students in higher education. So that's what really moved me to go back to pursue my graduate studies. I knew that I wanted to take a holistic approach to education. So I started looking at programs, and what stood out to me was higher education and student affairs. I didn't know anything about that. And as I began to read more about the different programs, I realized that student affairs was about developing the whole student, looking at them in their fullness and their humanity, paying attention to other parts of them outside of their academics. And I was like, I think this is my jam, right? This is my jam. So I applied and I went through a program that I'm happy to promote. It's called the Institute for the Recruitment of Teachers. They work with first gen, low income students of color who want to pursue any aspect of education, PhD work, master's, K through 12, where anything related, don't let the teacher part throw you off. Anything related to education, they support you in every step in the application process for applying for your master's or your PhD. You get an advisor, you meet with them weekly, they give you feedback on your statement of purpose, they help you come up with a customized list of schools. They also help you to give fee waivers for all of your schools, saving you up to $1,000. I applied to 13 institutions when I applied for my master's, and all the fees were waived. So they just made the experience, they removed a lot of barriers for me. And I came to UConn because I got an assistantship that covered my tuition and provided a living stipend for 2 years. And I felt like I hit the graduate school jackpot. So I didn't have to take out any loans or anything like that. But it was hard work, going to school full time and holding down an assistantship. I know Avery can attest to that. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but Avery's in the same program that I went through. And so that was my experience with my master's. But back to building relationships with faculty. Oh, I love the heart. Thank you, Avery. When I was in my last year in my master's program, Milagros Castillo Matoya, who is now a faculty member in the HISA program, she had just gotten hired, just joined HISA. So I hadn't taken a class with her or anything. But for some reason, we connected and we ended up having lunch together. And I was thinking to myself, oh, there's something about her I really liked. But what happened after I graduated, she invited me to do research with her. She invited me to present with her. She invited me to guest teach her class. So what happened was she started mentoring me. And every year while I was working, she'll get on the phone. She'll be like, Truth, are you still doing this PhD thing? Are you applying this fall? And I'll be like, no. And then she'll call me back the next year. And then by the third year, I was like, I cannot tell this woman no anymore. So I just applied to UConn. And what happened was through that application process, it confirmed that this is what I wanted to do. So it just shows that faculty members can give you that support and that push so you can see in yourself what they see in you.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So Jeff, this is for you. How did you navigate your industry as a first-gen professional? And truthfully, yeah, you could touch on this as well.
Sure. God, sometimes it feels like you're just kind of like on a river and you're just floating down the river and you're just saying yes, right? So I can give you a little bit of history on how I ended up at UConn, and then I could probably talk about that because I'll probably figure out some points along the way. So after I graduated, I applied to a couple different places. I wanted to do healthcare economics because I had been taking healthcare economics classes during my senior year, and those were some of the master's classes. And I thought that's what I was going to do. I also did an independent study in energy economics, and I wrote like a big paper that got published. I got lucky enough to find somebody to publish it, which is pretty cool. And I got two offers, one from Aetna and one from Northeast Utilities at the time. And the Aetna offer was like, yeah, we'll hire you in like 6 months. And I was like, I kind of need money now. So I went to work for Northeast Utilities, and I worked in their forecasting department for a while. That was okay. You find out pretty quick that the work that you do at UConn does not prepare you for the corner cutting and the ethically questionable things that you do when you get out into the workplace sometimes. So the job at Northeast Utilities was really to build economic models that predicted sales were going to go down as a goal-seeking measure, and then submit them to the utility company regulatory body so that they could raise rates. So that was my job for 5 years. And it was a group of about 6 of us who did this. And you have to testify on the stand to the state and the whole 9 yards. And it is horrible ethically. It is really, really bad to come home every day and be like, yeah, I just did that. I raised everybody's rates again at the state. It's horrible. So when I got tired of doing that, and I just couldn't stand myself anymore, I decided to apply to UConn because I found they were looking for somebody who was going to work in the budget office and do some of the things that I did at Northeast Utilities. It was going to be kind of a step back in my career to go do that. But at that point, I was like, I got to get out of here. This is just not okay anymore. So I went and I got the job at UConn. I got very lucky. They offered me the job here, but it was definitely a step back. So I think that's important too, is like be willing to take a step back sometimes to get yourself into a better space where you're happier, because you're probably going to produce better work and you're going to actually like what you do and you're going to work harder. So don't be afraid of that. So I worked in the budget office for a little while, and then I saw a job get posted in enrollment for a modeler, essentially someone to do analytics and figure out when we go out with all of our admissions offers, who's going to accept, because we have to, we go out with whatever 15 to 20,000 admission offers, and you have to be pretty accurate with the number of people you think are going to accept as a percentage, because otherwise suddenly the incoming class is twice the size it should be, and you can't house everybody and everyone's screaming, and then you get fired probably. But I mean, I'm joking. But so that was the job, and I was like, okay, this will be interesting. It's some finance too. So I did that for a little while, and then probably about 4 or 5 months ago, I got promoted to my current role, which is essentially trying to advise the university on how to handle and use student data to do all kinds of stuff, like the yield prediction, but also how to get into that retention space and graduation space where we have a lot of data and it's talking to all the other data, and we're able to figure out ways to really intervene with students. And I never thought I'd be doing this. Like I'd never, when I came out of school, I never thought I would be working on exactly what Truth was talking about before, is like, how do I get more minority students, first-gen students, under-resourced students, how do I get them to graduation? How do I get us in a space where the work we're doing is really positive and it's having a good effect on people? You talk about that, like life transformative education. How do we get in that space? So I never thought I'd be doing this. So I guess, how do you navigate this space as a first gen professional? I think I wouldn't have gotten a lot of these positions if I hadn't been willing to put in extra work. And I'm not talking about like work at work, extra work outside of work on like professional development early in my career, and just keep saying yes to things. So when I was at Northeast Utilities, someone said, hey, do you want to join this group called HABE? It was the Hartford Area Business Economists at the time. So, yeah, sure, why not? I'll go to the meetings. They take place after work. You go to a restaurant, you go to a conference, you sit there, and you just spend time and you start to know people, and it helps. But you kind of have a limited amount of that time after you get out of school, because life kind of gets in the way eventually, right? Like I didn't realize that until this point in my life, where now what life is definitely in the way. I have a baby and everything, but it's that those years after school where you have that extra space, if you're lucky enough to have it, to put in that extra work where you're developing kind of a resume and just saying yes. Like, do you want to do this? Yeah, sure. A lot of these professional development groups too, or professional groups in general, have space on their boards. So if you're willing to put in the extra work to do that, all you have to do is ask. They're always looking for help. So that's how I ended up on the board of the Hartford Area Business Economists. And these boards usually work in a linear fashion, where you start out as a secretary, and then you end up as the treasurer, and then you end up as the this and the that, and you kind of progress up the board, and then suddenly you're the president, and all you've done is just nodded your head. So I'd say that that's part of it, is just looking for ways to grow, especially when you're fresh out of school. Like, really gives you that forward momentum and a good launching point into your career.
Thank you for that, Jeff, especially like your journey from like doing work that you felt wasn't like in alignment with your values. And then even though it seemed like you were taking a step back, in many ways it became a step forward now that you're doing something that's meaningful, that you care about. So I can resonate. That resonates a lot with me. So thank you for sharing that. For me, a key lesson that I've learned as a first gen, when I started my first job after I left my higher education and student affairs program in 2014, I knew that I wanted a job working with first gen, low income, first generation college students. And I was given an offer at Bard College in upstate New York. And I was being offered $42,500. That was less than what I made before I earned my master's degree. But I had this mindset, which I'm a bit more critical about now. It's not a bad mindset, but it's something to think about critically. I kept saying to myself, I just want to do my passion. I don't care what I get paid. And that can be a trap, right? Where on one hand, it's not all about the money, But on the other hand, sometimes that can set you up to be exploited, or it doesn't put you in a position to fully articulate what you're worth. Because even though I was leaving a master's program, I had almost 5 years of experience working with first gen and low income students prior to. So it wasn't like my first job out of graduate school. So what I learned from that situation is you got to know how to negotiate, right? The first offer is not the final offer. I'll say that again. The first offer is not the final offer, right? Have that, do the research, right? We don't want our numbers to just come out of nowhere and sound crazy, but we try to get as much information as we can on the back end about with your experience, your education, other similar jobs in the field. Do as much reasonable research as possible and then choose a number within that range. But also keep in mind your responsibilities. Because when I graduated from HESA, my brother was going to undergrad and I was helping him get through school. So, I needed to be thinking of an income that will help me to support my brother because this work is generational, right? Of overcoming these generational barriers in my family. So for me to say, I don't care about how much money I'm making, that's not true. I need to care because there are other people in my family that I legitimately needed to support. So I would say, like, for first generation students, we have a lot of those responsibilities, especially if you're the first person in your family to graduate from college. They think you're going to be making all this money and you're responsible for helping others. You're paving the way for others. So that's something to keep in mind as one is thinking about, what you're negotiating. And also understanding your worth. Your worth is not just you don't just need to negotiate monetary things. So my second year, I negotiated for them to pay for my housing. So they were writing the check for my rent by my second year because I learned how to negotiate better. So once again, there's other ways to negotiate. When I went into another job at another liberal arts school, they actually gave me a meal plan, even though I wasn't living on campus. So, I mean, that saved me a couple of $100s. So there's other ways to negotiate. And we should be creative with that. So if that first offer that they give you doesn't seem that compelling to you, think outside of the box of like, what are some other things that will help you to stay there if you're at an institution and they can't compensate you in just purely in a financial way. Be creative and think about other ways that they can support you as well, and consider that in your negotiation.
Yeah, I can add to that too. That's right on. That is so accurate. I mean, you have to, and this is from the economist side of my brain, right? Where you have to look at the field you're in, look at the market you're operating in. Sometimes employment's tight, sometimes it's not. Sometimes the economy's bad and everyone's searching for a job. But right now, the market's very tight. You have to understand both where your value is and if you are willing to leave. And I know a lot of people in my professional career, and I have a lot of friends, I know a lot of folks who are just very unwilling to leave their position for some reason. I don't know why this happens. Maybe it has to have something to do with my first gen experience, but I'm always willing to leave. If I'm not being treated well or whatever, I'm not willing to sit in a position anymore, especially after the first time. When I was at the power company, I dealt with it for a lot of years, but the second you leave the first time and you realize that it's not that hard, like everyone is afraid to get that next position. They're afraid that, things are going to be different at this new job. I might not succeed. I might, and you learn that quick. The first time you leave a position, you're going to realize there's a whole big world out there and people are willing to pay you what you are worth, and people will, and they will appreciate you for what you can do.
Yeah, thank you so much both for that. It's very, very important to find careers and spaces that you're very passionate about. So when you're navigating these spaces, it's more enjoyable and you're also gaining professional development skills as well. So you both answered my question of what is something that you've learned as a first gen professional that no one prepared you for. But my last question that I will have for you both is what advice do you have to first gen students as they look for future careers or future programs to apply to? Drew, if you could start.
The wheels are still turning in my head. Advice I would give to first gen students. I probably just want to reiterate, like, know your worth. And also do your best to find work that honors your well-being, because burnout is real. And sometimes when we graduate, we're just in a hurry to work. But back to understanding your worth, not only in terms of like what you want to make, but how you want to be treated as a human being. Be real clear about that, because there's only one you, right? And your health is your wealth. It's not the other way around. So be clear on what your well-being goals are when you walk into a job, because when we don't have that clarity, we can, especially as young professionals, we can be exploited, taken advantage of, overworked, and that can have serious, serious consequences on your health, your relationships. It can affect your whole life. We spend the majority of our time at work. So I would say find work that allows you to center your well-being, that acknowledges your humanity, and that will allow you to continue to grow.
So God, this is a hard one. There's like a lot of stuff, right? I'd say I have like a couple of things. One is draw a line. So figure out where you want to be, figure out where you are, and you don't have to draw the line from A to B. There are a lot of steps along the way. So you have to recognize what those incremental steps are to get you to that final point. That's really important, because you're not going to, if you want to make a lot of money and you want to do something that you love, well, a lot of times that's tough right out of school, right? So you have to be like, all right, well, I'm gonna do this job and I'm not staying there forever. I'm just gonna do it because it's gonna get me a skill that I need to get that job down the line. So that's one thing. Another thing, the work that you do outside of work is probably the networking and the professional development is probably just as important as the work that you do at work, because that's where you're going to get those opportunities. For some reason, and I don't know why it is, you're always worth more to somebody else, right? The next company is just going to pay you more. I don't know why that is. The company you're at is going to give you your 2 or 3 or 5% raise each year, and they're like, very nice, keep doing your work, you're lovely. But that next company is going to give you a 20% raise just to switch. So that's one thing. And then also, I think the best bit of advice I ever got in my career was from one of my directors at the time when I was at the power company. And this guy he was unbelievable. He could talk, he could present, he could do anything. He was unbelievable. And he told me, he's like, "What do you think your job is?" I said, "I don't know. I do analysis. I build predictive models. I do whatever." He's like, "That's not your job. Your job is to make your boss successful. When he asks you for something, he's asking you for something. Don't answer that question. Answer that question, answer the next question that they have, and figure out what the value is to that person's boss. If you can make your boss successful to their boss, you will rise quickly." And it has worked. I can't fault him. It just seems to keep working. So it helps you see the big picture wherever you are, and it seems to just, I don't know, it's crazy. It's just crazy. So I never thought I'd be in the position I'm in, and I'm very lucky.
Thank you both for your advice and your words, your passion and your persistence. I really appreciate you guys coming on today and talking to fellow first-gen students.
Thank
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having us.
you.
Truth, nice to meet you. You are
Yes,
inspiring. Like, it
likewise,
is crazy.
Yes, I hope our paths cross soon.
For sure. For sure.